program is brought to you in part by
LifeBridge Health Brain and Spine Institute, dedicated to maintaining and improving the health of all people, and proud to support the Quality Difference on public television.
Thank you. I'm here to talk to you about a topic which is very dear to my heart. I want to talk to you about brain plasticity, and how you can prevent Alzheimer's disease. More than hundreds of research studies have now shown that your brain is not a rigid structure like your nose. Your brain cells are a lot like your muscle cells in that they have the capacity to grow and become stronger with exercise and with stimulation. Just like you can take steps to keep your body in good shape as you grow older, you can take specific steps to keep your brain in top condition as you grow older. We now believe that the kind of Alzheimer's that happens to people in their late 70s and 80s does not happen overnight. It takes many different factors which come together over many decades to cause atrophy, to cause shrinkage in the brain, and cause Alzheimer's symptoms. Fortunately, many of these factors are reversible. There are things you could do to protect your brain against damage, and there are also things you could do to make your healthy brain a healthier brain, a stronger brain. I would like to share my research and clinical experience to tell you how you can improve your brain health and how you can start your fight against Alzheimer's today. There are things you could do to keep your brain strong, and I will tell you this information through 6 steps. I hope to convince you that by making lifestyle changes, you can indeed ward off the age at which you may develop symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So, the first step is, please forget about Alzheimer's. Many baby boomers feel that when they forget things, they may be developing the first signs of Alzheimer's, and that is absolutely wrong. Many of you have thousands of pieces of information right this moment in your brain. You remember many things in your life. You may remember your first kiss. You may remember your high school graduation, your first day at work, your wedding night, when your first baby was born. Incidentally, I was once talking about these issues at a TV interview, and the host asked me during the break, "Dr. Fatuhi, I don't remember my first kiss. Is that a problem?" And I said, it wasn't probably a good one. We remember things that are emotionally important to us. We all remember what we were doing on September 11th. We know where we were and what we were doing that day, but we do not necessarily remember what we were doing on September 10th. Our brain has a way of storing information that are relevant. You don't want all that information anyway. You want the information that is important and relevant, and this is how our brain works. The second feature about memory is that there is a great deal of variability with regards to learning and memorizing things among different people. Just like people have different color of eyes, different heights, different personalities, they have different levels of ability to memorize things, and that's just fine. Just because your neighbor has a photographic memory, it does not mean they're smarter than you are. You probably have many skills that are better than theirs, and so you should not necessarily compare your memory to their memory. You should focus on your memory and how you can make your memory better. Thirdly, there is some decline with our memory after all, with each decade of life. It's about 1 to 2% for every 10 years. So people in their 40s are indeed a little slower than when they were in their 30s. This just happens. And the significance of that is just as much as you may have gray hair or a few wrinkles. It just happens that people in their 70s take that a lot more seriously than people do in their 30s. People become very concerned in their 70s when they forget things because they worry about Alzheimer's disease. Deep inside, they worry that those memory lapses may be the beginning of Alzheimer's disease. But why? Why do we have some decline in our memory with aging? I would like to take this illustration to show you how memory works in the brain. There is a layer of cells on the outside of the brain called cortex. Cortex is important for your ability to remember your high school graduation, your wedding, all information. Your hippocampus is important for your ability to memorize phone numbers and remember people's names. So when is memory loss concerning for Alzheimer's disease? After all, there are people who have memory loss who also have Alzheimer's disease. What is the difference? Let me give you an example to illustrate the difference. Let's imagine that you go to a birthday party on Sunday, and I see you on Monday, and I ask you, how was the birthday party? If you say, oh, the party was great, we had a wonderful time, but frankly, I don't remember names of people I met, that is considered okay. That is considered common. But if you say, what party? That is concerning. But the other thing that's important is that people who have Alzheimer's disease don't just have memory problems. They have changes in their personality. They can't do the things they usually do. They can't drive, they can't cook, they can't play golf. So Alzheimer's is not a mere memory problem. It's memory problems plus other things. And when somebody has memory problems, it does not mean they have Alzheimer's disease. Memory problems could be because of fatigue, depression, anxiety, medication side effects, low B12 levels, low thyroid, lack of sleep. If you're sleeping only 3 hours every night, your memory is not going to function very well. If you have pain a lot and you're not comfortable, your brain is not working well and you cannot remember things. If you can't hear well and if you can't see well, and if you have pain, you're not going to remember things. So, memory problems often have many causes that are treatable. And please, if you have a memory problem, do not think of Alzheimer's as the first possibility. It should be the possibility number 125, way at the bottom of your list. Let's focus on your brain and what you can do to improve your brain health so that you won't get Alzheimer's 20 or 30 years later. So that brings me to the second step in our journey to fight against Alzheimer's disease. The second and most important thing is to make your heart stronger if you want your brain to be stronger. Many studies have shown things that are good for your heart are also good for your brain. Mr. Jackson came to see me, not because he wanted it. His wife dragged him. It was 3 years ago. She complained that he sits around watching television all the time. He was a gentleman who was a retired IRS accountant, and he just wanted to watch television, have some beer, and smoke. And that's all he did all day, and his wife was really frustrated with that. So after much argument, she dragged him to see me. So when I tested him, he did not do too well. His memory performance wasn't that good, and his non-memory performance was also borderline. I obtained some blood tests. It turned out his cholesterol was really high, his B12 was really low, his thyroid was a little borderline abnormal. I ordered brain MRI. It showed that he had 3 strokes which he didn't know about. He had strokes sometimes happen in the part of the brain that are not directly linked to your ability to speak, to move, or to do things. So you have a stroke and you wouldn't know about it. When he heard about these things, he woke up. He said, I have to do something about this. And he came back for more testing. And in follow-up testing, I also found out he has a condition called obstructive sleep apnea. People who are overweight, people who snore at night, and people who feel groggy during the day may have a condition called obstructive sleep apnea, which means their brain does not get enough oxygen at night. Fortunately, this is also a treatable condition. The treatment is oxygen mask at night and also some medication which increase a person's vigilance during the day. So I started him on these medications, and I started him on oxygen, and he was more careful about his blood pressure, about his diabetes. He was 275 pounds, and he decided to cut back. and shed a few pounds. He actually lost 15 pounds. Now let me take a moment to tell you what is the link between all these vascular risk factors and brain health. The link is the following. Alzheimer's disease affects the hippocampus and the cortex and makes them smaller. It happens just by itself. We don't know why. It just happens. When you have a large stroke, a chunk of the brain, maybe the size of an apple, may get deprived of blood and dies, and a person can't walk or can't talk. And mini strokes or small strokes would have no symptoms. But let me ask you a question now. Do you think it is a bad idea to have strokes, small or big, at the same time you have Alzheimer's disease? It's a bad idea, right? Right. It is so obvious that if you have two bad things happening to your brain, it's worse than just having one bad thing happening to your brain. But this discovery actually happened in 1990s. Dr. David Snowden did a very elegant study. He asked a group of nuns if he could examine them over a period of time, many, many years. He also asked, do you mind if I look at your brain after you pass away? The nuns agreed to donate their brain so that scientists can look at the brains after they passed away and compare their brain and how they did in the memory tests to see what is the correlation. And what he discovered was quite surprising. There were nuns who were fine, who were sharp until the very last years of their life. However, the pathology, the brain examination showed they had Alzheimer's disease. Well, how could that be? If their brain had Alzheimer's disease, why did they not have any symptoms? So they looked at other brains, and it turned out that if you only had Alzheimer's disease, it would take you a longer period of time to get the actual symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. But if your brain also had mini strokes, you would get Alzheimer's sooner. Mini strokes or large strokes accelerate the age at which you show symptoms when you have Alzheimer's in your brain. Is that clear? I mean, it's quite interesting that you have strokes in your brain, which for the longest time we thought, oh, they're mini strokes, they don't do anything. But now we have realized that these mini strokes weaken the brain, make the brain more susceptible, so that when Alzheimer's comes, a person becomes demented really fairly quickly. And so this is the science why vascular risk factors are bad for your brain, and why protecting your brain against vascular risk factors help you protect your brain against Alzheimer's symptoms. You mean you still have Alzheimer's in your brain, but had no symptoms. So in this segment of the program, I hope to have convinced you that memory lapses do not mean Alzheimer's disease, and that you can do things to protect your brain against Alzheimer's disease by improving your heart. Do the things that you know are good for your heart, and your brain will benefit. In the next segment of the program, I'm going to tell you about how fascinating the brain is. I will also tell you how laughing more often may be really good for your brain. I'll see you.
This is really amazing and important information that we all can use. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Hill, and I want you to stay tuned for more of Fight Alzheimer's Early, 6 Steps to Keep Your Brain Young with Dr. Majid Fatui, and there's a lot more great information.
$60. In our 6-step program is Unleash Your Brain's Full Potential. I honestly believe that most people don't use anywhere near their full brain potential. Your brain's ability to do things is almost... As a neurologist, I always see patients who have had amazing recovery. And I would like to share with you some of the stories about these patients. But the important thing is, your brain has an innate ability to recover from injury and to grow. And I want to share with you about the mechanisms involved and how you can tap into your brain's innate ability to grow and become stronger. I personally first became interested about the brain when I was a teenager myself. I saw a young boy who had lost his arms in a car accident. He had learned to make beautiful paintings with his right foot. He would hold a painting brush between his first and second toe and make beautiful drawings. Let me tell you the story of one of my colleagues when I was at Harvard Medical School. He was a bright researcher in his 30s. One day, he had gone for a bike ride and forgot his helmet. As he was enjoying going down the hill, somebody suddenly opened the car door. His bike smashed into the door, and he went flying over the door and landed on the asphalt. Much of his brain was damaged, and he was in coma. He was taken to the nearest emergency room and quickly was taken to the intensive care unit. I went to see him the next day, and his mother was standing by the bed. I remember standing next to her, looking at the images on the wall, on the light box. The brain images showed that much of the left side of his brain was like a soup of broken bone, blood, and pieces of brain. A week went by, nothing happened. 2 weeks went by, nothing happened. 3 weeks later, he started to open his eyes. A few weeks later, he started to move his fingers. A few months later, he actually could sit up. The amazing thing about this story is that 3 years later, he was at work. I remember walking to the office and seeing him in front of a computer typing. I could not believe my eyes. Such stories of remarkable recovery are not rare. The ABC News anchorman, Bob Woodruff, also had a similar severe injury to his brain. And he too was in coma for a long time, and he too was able to go back to work, and I saw him doing interviews. As a neurologist, I also see on a daily basis people who have had strokes in their brain and part of their brain dies. The other parts of the brain who survive work overtime, such that people who lose their ability to speak or move one side of their body learn to go back and be normal again. Brain plasticity means just that. Your brain can grow and become stronger and compensate for the parts that have been damaged. Now, sometimes the brain can become stronger even without the damage to the brain. For example, when a person becomes blind as an adult, the part of the vision in the brain is not as important because the person cannot see. The other parts of the brain can help that person overcome this problem. So your brain can grow and become stronger, whether it's trauma, whether it's stroke, or whether it's something happened to your body. It can also happen with environmental pressures. Let's just say I give you $1 million cash if you learn to play the piano in 6 months, assuming you don't know how to play now. So many of you may think, oh, I can't play the piano, but $1 million is enough incentive for you to do that. And so, after 6 months, the parts of your brain that are important for controlling your movements will indeed improve, and your brain will indeed become better. This is called brain plasticity. But how does it work? Let's dive deep inside the brain and see how the brain cells work. Brain cells have extensions which come out of the central cell body. Brain cells communicate with each other through contact points between these extensions. These contact points are called synapses. There are 100 billion brain cells, and each brain cell may make thousands of connections, which means your brain, as you're sitting here, has trillions of interconnections we call synapses. That is quite interesting, but what is more interesting is the fact that the number of synapses can change with your life's experiences. So, when a person has injury to one side, the number of synapses increase on the other side to compensate and make a person function quite well. Let me tell you about a concept I find quite interesting. It is called brain reserve. Brain reserve means that throughout your life, you have many opportunities to increase the number of synapses in your brain. It is like putting money in retirement funds. And what I'd like you to do to improve and expand your brain reserve. How can you do that? Well, one thing you could do is to stimulate different parts of your brain. To do that, let me give you a tour of the brain. I built this 5-foot-tall brain model when I was both a student and a teaching assistant at Harvard Medical School. My students had a hard time learning the neuroanatomy, so I developed this brain model to help them with general landmarks of the brain. The brain on the outside is covered by the cortex, and the cortex in each part has different functions. The cortical areas in front of the brain help you with planning and execution of movements. So when you plan your weekend, when you plan your day, you're using mostly your frontal lobes. The parietal lobes on either side have slightly different functions. The parietal lobe on the right side helps you with orientation in space. So if I asked you, where are you right now in this city? Where are you right now in this country? You have a map in your brain as where you are. The parietal lobe on the left side helps you with arithmetics, simple calculations. So if you are at a restaurant and you're trying to calculate the 15% tip or 20% tip, you are using your left parietal lobe. There are parts of the brain called cerebellum. Cerebellum helps you with coordination, with balance, with dexterity. So when you can ride a bicycle, you're using your cerebellum to a large extent. There's also an important part called the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is where hippocampus lives. The temporal lobe is important for language and for memory. It also has many structures that are important for emotions. Parts we call limbic system. And that explains why you remember things that are emotionally important to you. It just happens that the part of the brain for emotion sits very close to the hippocampus and they have direct access to the hippocampus. And in fact, you can use that to your advantage. If you want to remember something, make it funny, make it emotional, you're more likely to remember it. So now let me open the brain and give you a tour of the inside of the brain. This is a model that shows the different structures and can help you orient yourself in different parts. The cortical areas are like a ribbon of cells all around the brain. The cortex is a part of the brain which is most unique to humans and is most developed in humans. It gives us the ability for higher brain function. So let's say I ask you to draw a clock and put the hands of the clock so that the time would be 8:25. The cortical ribbon in front would help you with planning your steps involved to draw the clock. The parietal lobe on the right side would help you decide whether you should put the numbers on the right, on the left, and where would the numbers go. When I want to test someone who has memory concerns, not only I ask them about their memory problems, I also ask them to draw a clock. I use that as a screening tool. So people who have Alzheimer's disease would have difficulty putting the numbers in the right order. They may get confused how to do it. Of course, your brain has many other structures that are not necessarily related to higher brain functions. These structures help you with routine things, such as walking, brushing your teeth, or eating. So, how can you make each corner of your brain stronger? You could do that if you stimulate it with certain hobbies. For example, you can learn to do crossword puzzles. You can learn to dance. You can take a hobby you enjoy. Recently, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Will Shorts, the editor of Crossword Puzzles for the New York Times, in his house in New York. We had a very fun conversation about brain, about memory, about the interplay of genes and brain health. And here's what he had to say about these issues.
Here's one of my all-time favorite puzzles. Yeah, it's easy to get one hand, but to get both at the same time. Try this.
Well, it's been my feeling and conviction for a long time that crosswords are good for the brain. They test your vocabulary, your knowledge on all subjects from classical to modern, your mental flexibility, even sometimes your sense of humor in figuring out the theme of a puzzle. So I think crosswords are good for you. And it only makes sense that they're good. If you want to keep your body in shape, then you should go to the gym or exercise in some way to stay in shape. Well, solving a crossword is going to do the same thing for the brain. And I think of solving crosswords like going to the gym and working out on all the machines, not just doing the Stairmaster or the rowing machine, but doing everything, because that's what a crossword will do. It will exercise all parts of your brain. I've always done puzzles because they're pure fun. I guess I know in the back of my mind that they're good for my brain, that they're good for me, but that's not why I'm doing them. I do them because I enjoy them. When you start a crossword, usually the best clues to start with are the fill in the blanks, because they're easy to spot in the list of clues, and they often have unique answers and are easy to get. Wherever you start, though, fill in what you know for sure, and then build outward from there. The best places to build outward from are the shorter answers, because if you have one letter and a three-letter answer, that's going to be more helpful than having one letter and a 10-letter answer. And if you get stuck, don't hesitate to guess, but also don't be afraid to erase an answer that doesn't seem to be working out. If you really get stuck, my advice is put the puzzle aside and come back to it later. It's been my experience over the years that people who solve crosswords tend to be happier and healthier than people in general. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if crosswords attract happier and healthier people, or if crosswords help make you that way. My feeling is that it's a combination of the two.
Recent studies show that you can increase the volume of your brain with exercises such as crosswords or other things. You can also expand your brain at work without realizing it. Use it or lose it really applies to your brain just as much as it applies to your muscles. And it's not just because you have a brain with certain talents and capabilities. You can improve your brain. What you need to do is pick up hobbies you enjoy. One of my favorite hobbies is dancing. When I got married to my wonderful wife, she was not too keen about dancing. So I invited her to come with me to Argentina. We went to Buenos Aires and we watched some of the tango performances, and she too fell in love with the dance, and we have learned to practice that over time. So you need to find hobbies that are best for you. One of my suggestions is when you're stuck in traffic, use that time for mental gymnastics. For example, you can memorize things. You can memorize phone numbers. You can memorize names of streets. You can also do simple mental exercises such as spelling the names of cities first forward and then backward. You can start with Boston or Baltimore, and then you can try Albuquerque. You can turn shopping into a brain-stimulating exercise. For example, when you go to a mall and you want to buy a purse, keep track of discounts. I'm sure many of you do that already in different stores. And in your brain, compare prices, and also keep track of the changes in discounts in your head. So if something is $40 and there's a 60% discount, try to do that in your head. You can also try other hobbies, such as trying new recipes, trying Sudoku, trying card games or puzzles. It really does not matter what hobby you choose, as long as you enjoy doing it. Because if you enjoy the hobby, you're more likely to keep at it and continue doing it. If you don't like fishing, don't even go there. Step 4 in our 6th step, fight against Alzheimer's, is the most fun one. Be happier, be sharper. Many research studies show that people who enjoy life in general tend to stay happier over time, and they also tend to be sharper over time. On the other hand, the stress is really bad for you. Stress is really bad for your brain. Let me tell you about the story of one of my patients I saw recently. Angela is a reporter in her late 30s. She was always an A+ student, and she was promoted at her work because she did a good job. As a result of her promotion, she was working 16 hours a day. She also had 2 kids and a husband at home, and she had to juggle many responsibilities at work and at home. Many nights she couldn't sleep, and as a result, during the day, she would drink 5, 6, sometimes 10 cups of coffee just to stay awake, to keep up with the work. She would get 50 emails and many dozens of phone calls every day, and she wanted to keep up, but she had noticed that she had become more forgetful. In one occasion, she forgot the name of the person she had interviewed. This is quite unusual for her. She panicked and she came to see me. As is usually the case, there's somebody with Alzheimer's disease in the family, and she did not want to be the person developing Alzheimer's disease. As you can imagine, she clearly does not have Alzheimer's disease, and I knew that the moment she told me that she's a reporter, she's working full-time, and she has all these things. But I wanted to tell her about stress, and I wanted to educate her that stress is affecting her brain both in the short term and in the long term. You know well that stress leads to high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, headaches, but also stress leads to shrinkage in the brain. I think it's not fair. The stressed people need their memory, and stress really damages the memory parts of the brain more so than other parts. Patients who have depression associated with anxiety over time have a smaller hippocampus also. Many studies have shown that those who have been depressed for a longer period of time have a smaller hippocampus. In fact, people with long-term depression are 7 times more likely to have Alzheimer's disease. Fortunately, this apparent atrophy in the hippocampus is reversible, and patients who receive treatment experience an increase in the size of hippocampus. In other words, your hippocampus is a dynamic structure, and your life can affect not only the size of your cortex, as we mentioned, but also the size of your hippocampus. So with Angela, as I do with all my patients, I did a memory test on her. She aced all parts of the test. Sometimes people so busy with their lives don't realize that the stress may be the cause of their memory problems. So she decided to go to her boss and ask for help. And not surprisingly, a part-time secretary became available for her to answer her emails and phone calls. So she had more time. She also made it a priority to spend time with her husband. They went dancing, and she went shopping more often. And in a few months, she felt much better, much, much better, and the worries of Alzheimer's obviously went away. So, what are the strategies that you can use to ward off stress and keep your hippocampus in good shape? Every time there's a fight, I look at people fighting and say, oh, I feel bad for your hippocampus. So, one of the things I like to do, if I ever get stressed, which doesn't happen very often, thankfully, is to meditate. I sit down in a quiet room, I close my eyes, I take a few deep breaths, and I repeat a mantra every time I breathe out. And within minutes, I feel more relaxed. Sometimes when I'm busy in the office, I close the door and I give myself a 10-minute meditation time. The other point that's very important for fighting stress is to have a positive attitude. You can see the bottle half full, or you can see it half empty. It will not change the outcome, but it sure makes a difference on how you view the life and how your brain stays stressed out or happy. The other important thing about fighting stress is for you to know your limits. There are people who can have 50 different responsibilities and still feel in control. Yet there are others who feel overwhelmed with only 2 or 3 responsibilities. People are different, and you need to know your limits. You may want to push your limits a little bit, but if you push too much and feel helpless and hopeless, you will not get any job done. So know your limits and work accordingly. The other thing is important. Please relax, enjoy life, and laugh more often. Did you know that children laugh 300 times a day? Adults only laugh 30 or 40 times a day. I wonder what happened. We take life too seriously. We need to relax our shoulders, relax our mind, and enjoy life. my recommendations is to spend more time with people who like to tell jokes and have a good sense of humor. You can also learn jokes yourself. It will serve two goals. It will help your memory to memorize something. It would also give you a chance to laugh, and also will help you to create a fun environment around you. And if you can create a fun environment around you, you and other people will be less stressed and everybody will be happier. The other thing I use to make sure I don't get stressed is I get organized. At the beginning of each month, I set priorities for that month. At the beginning of each week, I set priorities for that week. And at the beginning of each day, I make myself a list of things to do. And the list has to fit in a small card. When you're organized, you feel more in control and you're less stressed. The other thing that's quite important to fight stress is to make sure you have a good night's sleep. Many Americans have problems with sleep. Some have difficulty falling asleep, some cannot stay asleep, and some wake up early in the morning. Whatever the cause of your difficulty sleep is, chances are they are treatable. Most causes of sleeping problems are treatable, and taking sleeping medications really should be one of the last things on your list of things to do for your sleep. So in summary, in this segment of the program, I hope to have convinced you that when you use your brain, you're actually increasing the volume of your brain. You're creating new synapses in your brain. Your brain is a dynamic structure like your muscles. And also, if you're happy, if you have a positive attitude, and if you limit stress, you keep your hippocampus, the part of the brain important for memory, in good shape. And you make sure that your hippocampus stays strong when you get to your 70s and 80s so you can fight Alzheimer's then. In the next segment of the program, I'm going to tell you about the best food for your brain. I will also share with you some new information about exercise and the brain, which I'm sure you've never heard before. I will be right back.
Hello, I'm Rhea Fiken. Please stay tuned for more of Fight Alzheimer's Early, 6 Steps to Keep Your Brain Young with Dr. Majid Fatoui. And in the next part of the show, Dr. Fatoui is going to tell us how we can improve our brain.
You go to the phone and make this general. You're also going to receive
Today and in the long run, those of you who have a salty pretzel or you eat a sweetened soda and feel that your mind is cloggy and foggy, you know very well that the diet can affect your brain within hours. But did you know that the diet can affect your brain in the long run? There is, in fact, a close link between diet and the effects of aging. 3 things happen with aging: atherosclerosis, clumping of some proteins, as well as inflammation. And a good diet that addresses these issues can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease by more than 50%. So let's go over each of those factors and let me tell you how diet can affect each of those issues. Let's begin with atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis means the narrowing of the blood vessels because of cholesterol plaques. When you eat a diet which is high in cholesterol and high in sugar, cholesterol plaques form which narrow your blood vessels. Your brain weighs only 3 pounds. Your brain weighs about 2% of your body weight. But did you know that your brain consumes 20% of the blood that comes out of your heart? Your brain is hungry, is thirsty for good, fresh blood. And if you have atherosclerosis, you block all these blood vessels which limit the amount of blood that goes to your brain. How can you prevent that? Well, eat a diet that will not increase your cholesterol, and many of you are familiar. If you eat hamburgers every day, that will not be good for your cholesterol levels. But more importantly, please be careful about salt and sugar. Our diets in the United States are extremely rich in salt and sugar. We consume far more salt and sugar than we need. So when you have choices, please choose low-salt food and cut back on sweetened sodas. Cut back on the amount of glucose you consume. The second factor with aging is accumulation of certain proteins. We don't know why, but some proteins, such as amyloid, have a tendency to accumulate, to aggregate, and form clumps. We call these amyloid plaques. They don't happen in the blood vessels, they happen inside the brain. Many pharmaceutical companies are trying to develop drugs to reduce the amount of amyloid produced and increase the amount of amyloid from the plaques. But there is one herb, one spice, which may actually help you reduce the amount of amyloid plaques, and it's called curcumin. Curcumin is the Indian spice you taste when you eat curry chicken. I was recently traveling to Japan giving lectures at different universities. And when I was in Kanazawa University, Dr. Yamada and his colleagues were showing me the results of their experiments with curcumin and these amyloid plaques. They were showing me pictures of how when they add curcumin to the clumps of amyloid, the clumps resolve and dissolve and open up. This may be the reason why Alzheimer's disease is not as common in India as it is here. Did you know that Indians have a quarter incidence of Alzheimer's than we do in the United States? It's not clear why, but curcumin may be one of the reasons. There are clinical trials now in progress to determine whether giving people curcumin will heal and will treat early Alzheimer's disease. Until these results become available, we cannot make specific recommendations. But I think it's fair to say, if you have a choice of adding some spice to your food, you may want to consider curcumin as an option. Third factor, which happens with aging and which can be dealt with diet, is inflammation. You have all heard how inflammation happens in your joints and causes arthritis, how inflammation can happen to your skin and cause skin wrinkles. Well, some degree of inflammation can happen to your brain. For the same reason it happens to the joints and the skin. And diet can affect that. Fruits and vegetables are high in antioxidant vitamins, and these antioxidant vitamins can reduce the amount of inflammation in your joints, in your skin, and your brain. So many studies have shown that people who eat fruits and vegetables 4 or 5 times a day reduce their risk of Alzheimer's from 50 to 70%. This is almost too good to be true. But I can tell you, as a part of a team at Johns Hopkins doing this research, we now know that people who take vitamin E in combination with vitamin C cut their risk of Alzheimer's disease by 68%. And this is consistent with the results from other groups. So there is plenty of evidence that fruits and vegetables, especially antioxidant vitamins, such as vitamin E and vitamin C, are good for your brain. Now, let me ask you, do you think there is a food that would affect all the 3 steps I talked to you about? Is there a food that can affect atherosclerosis, that can reduce the amyloid load in the brain, and can reduce inflammation? It turns out that the omega-3 fatty acids, such as DHA, can affect all those 3 steps. DHA can reduce your triglyceride levels, which improves your heart health and improves blood flow to the brain. DHA, in some studies, reduces the amyloid load in the brain, and DHA can reduce the inflammation in the brain. So I think that the best brain food is DHA. Did you know that your brain is made in part from DHA? 15% of your brain is made up of DHA. DHA is important for brain development. That's why we add DHA to infant formula. Many research studies have shown that people who have Alzheimer's disease, people who have depression, people who have chronic fatigue syndrome have low levels of DHA. So, what is the recommendation that I think most neuroscientists and heart specialists agree on? Eating fish 2 or 3 times a week is really good for your heart and for your brain. So what is the best diet to rejuvenate your brain and keep your brain young? Well, you need to eat 4 or 5 pieces of fruits and vegetables every day. I recommend that you put a bowl of fruits on your kitchen table, and every time you need a snack, reach for an apple or reach for a pear. A glass of wine with dinner is great, but remember, only 1 glass with dinner. When you cook, you can use fresh fruits and vegetables, and again, these are high in antioxidant vitamins such as vitamin E and vitamin C. Eating fish 2 or 3 times a week is particularly good for your brain. It contains DHA, which is the brain food. Olive oil, which is one of the main features of the Mediterranean diet, is also high in vitamin E, and I recommend that you use that when you cook. Drinking milk is of course good for you, not only because it has calcium and vitamin D, which is good for your bones, but it also has B12 in it. You may want to eat meat and chicken also 2 or 3 times a week to make sure you have enough B12 levels. Eating a high fiber diet, such as bread, which is high grain, is particularly good for your cholesterol. High fiber diet increases your good cholesterol and reduces your bad cholesterol, and therefore it's good both for your heart and for your brain. And whatever you do, please don't eat too much. Now let me move and talk to you about the next segment of this program, which is exercise. I believe that exercise is indeed one of the best ways you can improve blood flow to your brain and improve your brain health. Did you know that exercise is a lot better for your brain than it is for your heart? So if you've been thinking about exercising, now you have an additional incentive to do that. Let me tell you about one of my patients who came to see me, again with concern for Alzheimer's disease. She's a very lovely lady in her 70s, a retired librarian who has only mild memory problems. But she's particularly concerned because 2 of her sisters and her mother were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she wanted to know all she could do to ward off and prevent Alzheimer's for herself. She was doing crossword puzzles, she was careful about her diet, she wanted to know what else she could do. And my recommendation for her was exercise. Exercise has many effects on the brain. As I mentioned to you, exercise improves blood flow, and the more blood flow to your brain, the happier your brain cells would be. Exercise actually increases the number of new blood vessels in your brain. It causes generation of new blood vessels, so a deeper corner of your brain can get blood supply. Exercise can also have a direct effect in the brain. When you exercise, levels of healing proteins in the brain go up. These proteins called growth factors, and one of them is called brain drive neurotrophic factor. I like to think of it as fertilizer for brain cells. So, my recommendations for you is, please, if you've been thinking about exercise, please just do it. Start easy. You may want to park your car a little further away and then walk. You may want to take steps more often. And what I usually do, when I go on an elliptical machine or a treadmill, I'm thinking about my hippocampus. I'm telling you, I say, way to go, hippocampus. So, remember, exercise helps you live longer. It improves your brain health. It also makes you healthier physically. You feel stronger, and more importantly, you feel more confident. It is really important for you in the short term and in the long term. Many people say, well, I'm too old for that. Dr. Carl Cotman in California addressed that question specifically. Can you teach old dogs new tricks? He actually did that. He divided 60 old beagles into 4 groups. One group didn't do anything, they just minded their own business. One group received an antioxidant diet. A third group received a lot of physical and mental stimulation. And a fourth, what I call deluxe group, received both the good diet and good brain stimulation. As you can imagine, the group that received the diet and exercise treatment did a lot better than any of the other groups, as would be expected, for me anyway. And this is not surprising. Those of you who go to gym and see some of the elderly running and being in good shape know that they are doing things to improve their health and they are not using age as an excuse. And please don't do that. You can improve your brain at any age, and diet and exercise are particularly important. Every day you do something to take care of your teeth. Please, every day do something to improve your brain health. You can do it, and it's easy. I hope I've convinced you. It is easy. Well, let's review the 6 steps that we've been talking about. Step number 1, forget about Alzheimer's disease. If you're a baby boomer, the chance that you have Alzheimer's disease is less than 1%. And more importantly, there are things you can do to ward off, to delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease decades later. The sooner you begin, the better it is. Step number 2, keep your heart strong. The things that are good for your heart are also good for your brain. Third, stimulate your brain. It is really easy to create new synapses and to increase the size of your brain. Dancing, crossword puzzles, doing mental gymnastics when you're stuck in traffic. 4, reduce stress. Laugh more often. You need to be relaxed. You need to enjoy life. I think it's a good deal. Enjoy life. No, I don't want to enjoy life. Please, take it easy on yourself and the people around you. Enjoy life. It's good for you in the short term and in the long term. Diet. Please put aside junk food. And when you want to reach for a snack, reach for an apple. Reach for a grape. Number 6, exercise. Exercise truly boosts your brain power. Exercise causes the generation of new blood vessels. So you have more blood flow through big vessels, and you have new blood vessels to feed your brain. It also causes the release of healing proteins, feel-good proteins. It reduces your risk of stroke by 57%. No other drug can do that. Now, let me share with you some strategies you can use to incorporate these lifestyle modifications on a daily basis. First of all, start with passion. Be excited about your brain and your brain health and improving the quality of your brain over time. However, start easy. Do not decide to change everything in one day. You may start with simple exercise or simple changes in your diet. Chart your progress. Write down how much you walk in a week. And when you reach certain milestones, give yourself a reward. Go shopping, go to a trip, buy yourself something you always wanted. Enjoy life, be relaxed, laugh. Above all, please don't waste your time worrying about Alzheimer's disease. Worrying will not change anything. The time you spend worrying, you can do things to improve your brain health. If you want to ward off Alzheimer's disease decades later, you need to start your fight today. My name is Dr. Futuri. Thank you very much.
That's great television.